And speak up, because if not, it might get, the public might not like it too well if they can't hear you.
We'll go ahead and call our work session to order. It is 4 p.m. We all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and all stand for a moment of silence, please. Go ahead and turn to discussing ARPA tonight. We'll go ahead and turn it over to April.
do this in stages, and the first discussion is going to be the hospital. Under the American Rescue Plan funds, hospital and COVID changes and COVID mitigation is an eligible expense. Now, we know, I have a couple of notes at the bottom of this email. This email was actually sent by the county manager to Catherine Doby with the hospital. And the question was, what kind of changes were made to the plan of the hospital due to COVID? So she has explained that in detail. This is an eligible expense under the ARPA funds. And at the bottom, I have lined out, or I have got it defined, each year that has been paid to the hospital, the verbal commitment that was done by the board. 17-18, $100,000 was paid. 18-19, $100,000 was paid. 2021, $100,000 was paid, because there was a year in there that the board and the hospital had a discussion of delaying that $100,000. In this current year, in the budget, we have budgeted the $100,000. So it's my understanding through conversations with Drew, we pulled minutes back from several years ago. I believe the commitment from the board to the hospital was $700,000 total. Is that correct? Okay. So that basically leaves $300,000 left to pay the hospital for the remodeling and the capital improvements. And at this point, the changing and the mitigation of COVID and any type of pandemic that might happen in the future. About a year and a half ago, and be where we are now, hopefully be back to more normalcy than we are, but we're not. That did spur changes with the hospital, and this is an eligible cost under the ARPA funds.
Hospital.
I personally haven't had a conversation with the hospital.
Identification in the email.
That's all you get.
I specifically talk about that pledge, so I would think there is a mutual understanding on that.
I know they didn't directly address it, but, you know, assume, we know what assume is.
What's our balance again over?
400,000.
400,000.
Well, with this year's,
Actually, it's 500,000 because they told us one year that they didn't need it. That was whenever we received notification.
I believe the initial commitment was $700,000, correct? Okay.
It's $100,000 a year for 7 years.
Correct. And then that's what I have laid out at the bottom of the page that I have handwritten, with including this year's budgeted amount, because we can't use these funds for that budgeted amount this year. That would be $400,000 in all toward that pledge.
So that would leave 300,000.
It would leave $300,000 toward the pledge that the board did.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask the county manager, what are you looking for from us? Permission to?
We just have a general discussion about it first and foremost, but perhaps if it's a favorable, any of these suggestions are favorable, then we bring that back at your mid-month meeting to have an appropriate vote to either confirm or deny those suggestions. I will say that I
Like a consensus of the board?
absolutely, if we don't need to move forward with this one, we'll discard it and go somewhere else. But
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that you ask for a consensus of the board on this matter.
before we go that direction, I would be curious to know if, and I know this is talking about the specific prior commitment a board made, but I would be curious to know, do we know or have they, and it may say in there, I haven't read it, whether or not they have received any COVID money available to grow or any.
Do not know.
What is the feeling of the board, the consensus? Let's talk about that.
Well, I'd like to see what the other request.
Question is to have Michael continue with questions and.
That's what we're getting the consent from everybody's consent about, right? That's correct.
So it's not a no from me, but it's not a yes either, because I need to see what else we're going into. That's my answer.
Perhaps a very quick identification of the amount of funds that we know what we're talking about, and the reminder, and I think you've all been in meetings and we've all heard about it. Even though we received that amount of monies, which is how much?
It's $1,080,616 for this round. That's basically 50% of what we're going to be receiving.
And no locality around that I know of, heard of, spoke to, heard reference to. Everybody's being cautious with this money because the rules change each and every day. So this afternoon's suggestions on ways to utilize some of this money does not incorporate that full amount right up front. It's not a decision that you've got to weigh it all out because there's one big lump and we're going to give it all away. That's not what we're talking about here today. We have a few different areas that we'd like to utilize in the first round of considerations and then hold the remainings till more doors open.
I would like to hear the rest of the askings too, really, to see where we are, just to get a general idea.
$80,000.
Bob, you can have my copy if you don't object, April. I already have a copy of it.
I can get you the information. Okay, what you have before you this round is the initial list that came from law enforcement and a few notes that I made from our August meeting when we were together with a work session. They had asked for a vehicle, $40,000, and during that meeting, I believe Nick spoke to the group, and a 4x4 Durango for a road vehicle was identified. Also, some technology is the next two things. One thing was put off the list, that third thing, and then a lot of these things, the mobile units. We had 12 on there, but during the meeting, he upped that to 14. And then a couple of just surveillance things, technology things for law enforcement. I don't want to get into too many specifics because I know that day Nick didn't want to get into. All of this does fall under the ARPA funds. Technology specifically falls under ARPA funds. The vehicle, we have had multiple conversations about the vehicle, and I had just brought a budget amendment before the board reducing the one vehicle that was budgeted for out of their budget because of a GCC grant reduction. So these are continuing conversations that we started in August about law enforcement.
I believe today, and Nick, I didn't have a chance to call him back, but I think he called in today with another vehicle, if I understand. Because it may be another need that we could also include to this.
Go ahead, Nick, if you'll explain that.
Yes, Publix, this is being broadcast.
This is an additional vehicle, right?
Yeah, so I'm not here to ask for a new vehicle today. If the board were willing to give one, I couldn't buy one today, no way, just because they're not there. Our patrol fleet, I think we've spoke in the past about, the mileage that those things are accumulating. I think I'd sent out an email to some of you guys and maybe to county manager about the mileage that's rolling up on them, and the average mileage is up around that 100,000 mile marker. We've got a lieutenant over the patrol division's truck is high mileage. It's not a patrol worthy vehicle. It might make a great maintenance vehicle or something to that effect, but it's not a vehicle that can go up and down the highway every day to answer calls for service. So I have been looking for a vehicle to replace that one with, and I hadn't got to talk to Carter about it, but I briefly spoke to Drew this morning, and we have some asset forfeiture dollars that I was willing to dip into to purchase the vehicle, but was in hopes of pitching if we purchased the vehicle from asset forfeiture out of sheriff's asset forfeiture funds, would the county be willing to upfit the vehicle with the radio equipment and the cage, and some of the upfitting I actually already have, so it wouldn't be a complete upfit, but it would be a 3/4 plus upfit, I would say. I have rifle mount kits and things like that. So that would have been the conversation that I was going to have with Michael about that. But we're more than willing to try to purchase the vehicle out of our funds if we could find a few extra funds just to help put some of the equipment in it.
Questions?
Yes. We know that your software at the dispatch is way out of date. Why didn't you include some of that money in?
The dispatch center is in transition right now through, and all of those items are included in this grant that we've been approved for. I don't want to purchase something that's already included in that grant.
Okay. Thank you.
Have a rough estimate on a 2/3 upfit?
Yeah, I would roughly say $7,000 would get me everything that we need.
Around 7,000.
Around $7,000 should give me about everything that we need. Yeah.
Questions? Thank you, Nick. We appreciate it.
Anything on what we've discussed previously?
I'm showing a mark off on the P-TAC drone.
Yeah, it was a mark off before we even discussed it in August. We struck that one pretty much at the date that we submitted it.
The figure I have is 105,250, but it actually goes up a little bit more because you wanted 2 more dual band radios.
Oh, so the figure stays correct. I put in 12. It should have been written in as 14 at the time, but that number stays there, and we'll just get
250 is.
Yeah, and of course those quotes came in, I think, in July, so I'm sure they've not changed. So
Thank you.
Is the 105?
does not. No, that's a different need there.
Actually, marking off the drone, the amount is $100,400 is what it would be. Didn't do that.
What does the 2 extra radios equate to? Because
That number stays the same. That number should.
oh, okay.
Typo.
The reason I bring that additional vehicle up is they're simply their funds to think about in that consideration for that upfit.
At the same time, you can't get one because of the chip prices.
I found 2 used whole vehicle possibility. Both have 50,000 on them. What happens with a 50,000 mile vehicle better than 100? Not good for the job. And I'll say this, I mean, there's additional asset forfeiture funds there, but what I would like, do I need to go back to the mic?
They can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
So, I mean, I could say this, we could pull the additional funds from there to, there's enough money there to pull that additional 1,000 from. The problem is, that money is used for certain types of specialty investigations as well, and if we deplete, then therefore we have problems on the backside.
If it's a used vehicle, does that come equipped with something of this 7,000 that you were asking for, cages and?
No, it does not. So what happened was, there's, I guess, some of these agencies, they swap these cars out much lower mileage than we do, and they go ahead and strip those cars. The only thing that I could actually see that on this car that we wouldn't have to add would be a console. That's one thing that was already in it. And then I seen remnants of the front push bumper that you see on all of our cars. So there's a piece of that there as well, but we would still have to go ahead and add the remaining portion of that push bumper.
Thank you, Nick. Anybody got any more questions about this? Yeah.
Move on to the next
Move on.
category. Okay. I can get you a copy of most of it after the meeting. Now, some of it has employee information.
Bob, you need a copy?
Here, I can give you the
I've already got a copy of my reference material.
The spreadsheet needs to stay here. It's got personal
Bob,
information on it.
Can't have it, it's confidential information, sorry.
You can have this one, Bob.
Personnel.
Guillotine. There'd be a guillotine come down as you exited the building.
Welcome. What you have on the front 2 pages, it's front and back, is actually a definition of premium pay from the UNC School of Government. This was part of a webinar that I participated in a few months ago, and this is actually posted on their website. To qualify for premium pay, there's a few things that have to be in place. And when I talk about premium pay, we're basically talking about hazard pay, working through the pandemic. So On that first page, one thing that the board, we need to discuss is actually doing a policy for hazard pay if we're going to pay any hazard pay out. Who qualifies for it, the length of time, what qualifies them for this. Of course, they've worked through the pandemic. This can be retroactive. It can go back to March of 2020, March 1st of 2020. It's basically for folks that have had hand-on contact with the public, have worked side by side with their coworkers, have handled things from the public like items or money or bills. There's all kinds of things we need to define, and we do need to define that today so we can get that policy in place. And then the next step would be the spreadsheet that I have handed out to you. And what we went with, Michael and I discussed kind of rates and how to come up with this. When we talked about this in August, we talked about with full-time employees, $100 per month, starting in March of 2020. If we go through this month, or excuse me, if we go through October 31st of 2021, we're talking about 20 months of pay. For someone that has worked the whole time, that would be $2,000 is what that would be. Any of the part-time folks that have worked, what I did is I took how many hours they had worked in that past 20 months. We talked about a $60 per month allocation for part-time workers during the pandemic. So that total for that person would have been $1,200 for the total 20 months. Depending on how much they worked compared to a full-time employee, there's a percentage that's done there. And then there's a calculation out to the right that tells you how much that part-time employee would receive. Now, we have a couple of different situations, and I'm probably going to have to tweak this a little bit because we have part-time folks that have moved into full-time positions. I've tried to go through and manually do that, but I may have to do a little bit of tweaking. We've also had full-time folks like paramedics that have left but are still with us part-time. So we've got to have those discussions of are we going to pay hazard pay? How's it going to be structured? And then who we're going to pay it to.
We need to,
Any questions about the information you have in front of you?
all in yellow is qualifying.
Okay.
Explain that.
In orange is actually employees that, and I will use me for an example. I actually changed position in the past 20 months. So that's why you see my name twice, but I have it highlighted in orange because the combination of those 2 hours total up to 3,440 hours, which is what you would have worked the last 20 months if you were a full-time employee. If you go on down to like the next 4 departments down, there's an employee there that was actually part-time with us, then went full-time with us, and I have both of that employee's pay highlighted there for you in orange. One's the part-time and one's the full-time. So those two would be added together. Make sense? If you go to the second page, everything that's highlighted in bright yellow, that's your part-time folks. And that is the hours that they worked. And then you go out to the side and you can see the calculation that I did. And then there's several in the next couple of departments that were either part-time and moved to full-time with us or moved to another department. We actually have a couple that moved departments to other jobs. And if you go on down, EMS is one of our bigger question marks because we do have folks that worked full-time. They have resigned and went somewhere else full-time, but they're still with us part-time. So they could have worked 16 months with us full-time and 3 months with us part-time. Still be employed with us currently. Do not have anybody on this spreadsheet that is not currently employed with us. Resigned or retired, they're not on the spreadsheet.
In that video, you did full-time, part-time, once in full-time.
Yes.
Would that be at 8? Time and
That's correct. If that's what the board
that's
decided.
kind of what you're
Yes.
somewhat proposing, or your thinking is.
If they're still currently employed with us and they're part-time, but they worked full-time during the pandemic, go ahead and pay the $100 time. On that front page, that's the scenario we have with that one employee. With the two, yes, you would.
It's $100 per month is what we're looking at. $60 for part-time.
Yes. Then compare that to how many hours they actually worked.
That's backing up to March of 2020.
2020. March 1st of 2020, yes.
Department of Social Services is included in this.
They're at the very end of the spreadsheet. And there's several of those who have changed positions, so there's a lot of orange in that department.
Not include the others that had requested the premium pay, like Council on Aging,
I have those
Alleghany County
separate.
Group.
I have those separate printed out for the
you.
board to discuss, yes. This is just county departments, just county employees.
No objections in
So
doing the pay in the manner that David, Chairman.
So just so we all understand, everybody's getting something that's basically in county government for working through the pandemic.
If they are employed
they're-
with us now, yes, they are
Right.
getting something. They're getting some type of hazard/premium pay. This
Yeah.
would, yes,
from happen in one,
yes, and it has to go through payroll. That would be part of our policy. The retirement would have to be paid into the retirement system.
This is before taxes, right?
This is before
Before
taxes.
taxes.
Now, at the bottom of the page, you do have a total. For the full-time, $196,700. For the part-time, $14,936.67. And then your total would be $211,636.67. And then I've added FICA and an estimate of retirement. Now, that's a good estimate of retirement. It's probably a little bit high because law enforcement retirement is higher than a regular employee retirement. I averaged the two and went a little bit high on that just to see where we wanted to go with the policy.
Chairman, if it helps watch the commission. This is basically the way that they're doing theirs also.
We're starting with 21. I get it was working from there, but that's basically what we're doing, the same thing. Everybody in consensus to roll with this? I think it's a good
I
plan.
think it's good.
Well, Mark? I would like to see it get to these folks before Christmas, though, if at all possible.
The intent is to have it effective at the first December. In
Correct.
order to do that, you're going to have some items on your agenda, mid-month agenda, as April addressed, to put into policy.
You're on there, we'll take care of it. Bobby?
I just got a general question. About overtime? How does someone rack up 611 hours overtime?
How would somebody do that? Being down employees. You tell me which department you're looking at?
On the sheet, first sheet, fourth from the bottom, on the first sheet.
That's possible. Being down employees. Now that's 20 months. We're talking about almost 2 years. But yes, sir, that is possible.
Okay.
Who is not included in the,
As far as county employees, all the regular scheduled part-time and full-time employees are on this spreadsheet, yes. The only ones that wouldn't be are the ones that we're getting ready to help with the election, but they've actually already received those part-time temporary workers last year during the election. Sherry got some CARES money, and they actually got some payout for hazard pay for working through the election. The poll workers did.
If they're no longer, if they've been employed and they're no longer employed, they're
Not
out.
on this
They're
spreadsheet,
not on this spreadsheet.
no.
You on?
Does everyone agree with kind of how I laid it out for the policy? Okay, because we do need to get that in place at the next commissioner meeting to be able to pay it out the way that the county.
Need another work session to do any of that, we'll be glad to do that, but let's get it scheduled.
I think
for
I can
mid-month.
probably get the policy, like a draft of the policy, and maybe we can email it out to everyone to see if we need any feedback before it goes to the board. Is that?
Works.
Information you gave us where it talks about premium pay, and we're essentially that clarifies that?
Yes.
Like, okay.
The U.S. Treasury, and actually, if you read some more into this, yes, it is. We are talking about the same pay. Do you want, we have a request from Council on Aging and ADAP, basically for the same consideration. For like both of them at once, or you want to talk about them one at a time?
Mr. Chairman, if we set the policy for county employees and we do it for the other essential workers, I think it ought to be the same policy.
So,
our employees? You want that back? That's okay. What back? Just those? Yes. Okay.
This from the last time.
You have before you now is from Council on Aging. Karen basically has it spelled out with part-time and full-time employees, and looks like the amount of meal delivery staff. It looks like to me she's asking for 4 full-time employees, and everyone else would be part-time.
Chairman, the meal deliverers, they are not paid. This is volunteer. But I would recommend that we make a lump sum payment of $250 per
Volunteer.
the volunteers. I mean, that won't even cover their fuel bill. At least they would be recognized and receive some funds for that.
Talking about the 15 difference that.
15, yes.
Meal delivery drivers.
Right.
Where do we stand in other organizations for this volunteerism? For Q.
And then have we received any other requests from other organizations? Not to my knowledge for specifically hazard pay / premium pay for.
Alleghany County Group Homes, Council on Aging.
I don't know that the group home is asking for anything for volunteers, but that's our
We
next.
have no volunteers
Okay.
because of the nature of the work under Medicaid.
Would. And
I think Karen to the county manager. I think she's just putting it out there.
It was in her,
What would the total be on this?
3750s, well,
the 15 meal delivers is what I've got, 3750. For the full-time would be,
8,000 if they all worked the 20 months with the discussion that we just had about county employees, you're talking about $8,000.
don't know that today though, do we? If they work the full.
I do not know that. We would have to, if you wanted to frame it like you just did for the county employees, we'd have to get a little bit more information about the part-time to be able to do that calculation like I did for the part-time county employees.
Ask Michael his thoughts.
The same formula that we use for the other employees, and then we get it out to you.
what would you guesstimate, April, 12,000? I heard 8,000, and then we had the 3,750.
37. It's honestly going to depend on how much those part-time workers have worked. Then FICA, and then if there's, are you just going to do salary and FICA?
Yes. I believe that we should, if we're going to do this for Council on Aging, Alleghany County Group Home, we've got to give them guidance that this must be supplemental salary.
That's
Where they
correct.
pay taxes, we've got to give that caveat, and they've got to give us a report that they have done this.
And that's in the U.S. Treasury guidance. Yes, so anything that is paid out, they will have to report it back to us that it has been paid through payroll and we're not supplanting anything that's budgeted or anything. This is on top of their salary.
Does the $600 threshold before taxes come into play here? Since these folks has never been paid and they're volunteer, and this is for $250.
Anything that's paid out of this anyway, we have to report. Anything that's coming out of this $1 million allocation, I have to report to U.S. Treasury.
I'm trying to keep a running tab. I'm going to use $15,000 to cover the FICA and everything for that.
That sounds
That'd be a
reasonable.
pretty good guess.
That sounds like a reasonable estimate to me. That way, once I get the numbers, I can get it to the board.
Yes, ma'am.
Everybody good with that?
I'm good.
Bob? Martin? Shelley?
Anybody else have any questions about Council on Aging? was the email that was requested from the group homes that was sent to the county manager. They've actually, she's got listed out names and everything.
He
And
gives ours also,
she does give hours.
so it's easy to figure out full-time and part-time.
Yes, and I can,
Part-
Only one that I saw.
there is something
Backside.
printed on the back
Oh,
of the
yeah.
first page there, yeah.
One that was only employed for 3 months. The 18 months, everything she's got marked 18 months would actually fall within the time frame. So I'm satisfied with that.
I can go back and do the calculation with that and. At 17,
17 on the front sheet. Figure 50,000, I think that would cover it.
front sheet's gonna be 34,000 with the 17. FICA. She's got the hours there, so I can do the calculation, but yeah, I would,
For the running total
Rough
as an
estimate of
estimate, I'll
50,000.
put down 50,000. I'd rather overestimate than under.
I know it was mentioned about the library, I think, over here. Did have a request from the library, but I don't know that we had specifics from that, from the library.
Qualify.
We would have to look into that a little bit, qualifying. I think the library was closed during some of the months. I don't know how many
How
months.
would it be COVID related as far as,
Would have to get some more details on that. Because one
you're
of
going
the
to
things,
present streetscape for the mural? It's divine intervention.
Okay, Bobby?
Just after some recent events here, I just want to be sure that all of these meet the criteria of what the feds or the state sent down before we start handing out money. Have we been through all of these and we're sure that we're following the guidelines?
all of these that you have in front of you meet the guidelines from the U.S. Treasury.
There are some other requests that have been received that you don't have before you today because you're not certain they meet the criteria. But as I stated earlier, the rules will change. So right now, those requests are over in another pile, just in case that something allows that to be considered at a later date. But right now, these are the ones that stand out.
These have been vetted and everything's okay.
I think we need to check into the library. They were closed a little bit, but they were open a lot too.
Yeah, but they weren't COVID, they weren't contributing to the pandemic.
We would have to see how they fit into the guidelines, because
Just, if they fit in the guidelines, we need to do something with them there to,
In-person interview.
get a lot of visitation over at the library and they weren't part of the increase in pay or the 2% and the 2% for them couple of months there because the way their pay system works and we didn't, in the budget, we didn't allow for their pay increase on their study they had.
let me give you just a little definition that they have. This is some of the initial definitions. Public safety, public health, health care, human services, and/or similar employees. So that's kind of where it starts, and it goes from there. You'd have to ask a few more questions and get a little bit more information.
That's what I'm saying. Let's check it out thoroughly, and if we can legally do anything, we need to, and if we can't, we can't. Fair?
I will also tell you the final rule. I know I was asked at the last board meeting. It's not out yet. They're still talking about it.
Jello.
And I actually looked today, and they're saying fall. So we're in the fall season, and we still don't have the
which year?
final rule. So I'm going back to the July 19th final rule is the one that I'm going back to, but they're still defining things, as Michael said.
Chairman, for your information, I'm showing a total that we have come up with $722,840 and
It's including the hospital.
yeah, include the
122 now.
722,840.77. Just to round up, I think that we could say 725,000 is what we've looked at today. Rather overestimate than under.
Anybody got any more questions?
That is all I have for today. We want to talk about part-time salaries. Michael and I. In the budget process, we did not include any raises for part-time employees.
I get questions a lot about the fire departments. They was out during all this, doing their duty. Are there any here or in the future, any monies that's available for them? Those situations where they went to COVID houses and helped get people in and out and so forth, and they were front line too, is what I'm trying to say.
And they would qualify.
Same deal. Rescue squad's the same, although they're volunteers.
Would qualify.
Qualify.
Leave the rosters as requested. Your fire department and the rescue. We can calculate.
I do not have rosters. Do you?
You can get them pretty quick.
If they qualify, I would recommend that we include them, but we need a roster of those that are certified firefighters and EMS.
I think we need to ask for current rosters if we're
Yes.
going to get today.
As part of the budget process, which we're going to start in January anyway, so.
Coach, I mean, so far has been.
We have the suggestion
Motion.
about the volunteer meal drivers.
If money,
We haven't had a request for this.
Well, I would just say that give us adequate time.
one question that I would ask you to ask, does this make them county employees and does it affect the volunteer?
Not going to make them.
Not that I don't think it's falls within the criteria at all. Again, back to what I said originally. I have set allotment, that there are still lots of avenues to open on. So, it's our first round. If your numbers are correct, we're somewhere in the $700,000 of that $1 million right now. There are several other things that are left to be determined. Now, we will get another round, but I put my foot on the brake, but I think we need to be cognizant of that.
Fear is, don't want to violate any of their guidelines, because I don't want to have to pay this money back in a year or two.
But you're pretty firm in what we've done today, as being legitimately legal with, we wouldn't be here.
April gave a blood sample and a urine test to be able to sit in on all this stuff. So.
But did they check
My
for
left
But
DNA?
yes, I mean,
You know, the worst thing we can do is, have this meeting and get everybody's hopes
Oh,
up, and then something changes, and then you go downhill. That's not a good thing.
That's why what you've been presented
Yeah.
has been fleshed out. These other components have not been.
Just because there's a pot of money doesn't mean it's just that easy to dole it out.
Is everybody good with everything we've taken consensus on tonight?
So let's rewind real quick if we can. April, what do we need to have for the mid-month meeting to,
I will get the hazard/premium pay policy to the board. I think we just need a breakdown of everything that we've talked about today. With final figures. With Council on Aging and ADAP. And some questions.
what about on the sheriff's department's request to, now these were estimates or these actual numbers, Nick?
Added, you said $7,000 additional. I added that into that figure, plus a little bit more, so.
I guess why I'm asking, this was done a few months ago. And we're gonna have actual numbers. Do we need to go back and make sure these are still good numbers?
I feel pretty.
You got a little bit of,
We need everything ready in 2 weeks to pass on that and make that happen by the 1st of December's paychecks, right?
Alleghany County Group, I think you've got enough information there that you can do work theirs.
I think
Give you
so,
the
but
hours
I
for-
will contact
Yeah.
Becky just to make sure we're on the same page.
Council on Aging.
Does that conclude?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Mr. County Manager, Meltz, Pam.
You got anything? A motion second, all in favor of adjourning. Be back 6 o'clock.
I might even get